that we may wisely take counsel together and come to such decisions as shall promote your glory and the well-being of all our citizens in this our land, so that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be enjoyed by all people. Grant this for the sake of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Oath of allegiance of a new member. Announcements by the presiding officer.
Members, I have received requests for leave of absence from today's sittings from the following persons. Member for Bacalet Mount St. George, Assemblyman Joel Jack. Member for Blackrock, Wim Spring Garden, Assemblyman Kelvin Charles. The leave requested is granted. Members, let me take this opportunity to recognize the new Chief Secretary and Secretary of Tourism, Culture and Transportation, Honorable Ansel Dennis. Members, at the last meeting of this House, a vacancy was declared in the position of Deputy Presiding Officer. Therefore, in accordance with Section 21, Part 4 of the Tobago House of Assembly Act No. 40 of 1996, members of the Tobago House of Assembly, you are now invited to submit nominations for the position of Deputy Presiding Officer.
Madam Presiding Officer, I beg to nominate Assemblyman Shomari Hector for the position of Deputy Presiding Officer.
The nomination.
Are there any other nominations? If there are no other nominations, I now declare Assemblyman Shomari Hector duly elected Deputy Presiding Officer. The President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago will administer the oath of office to the Deputy Presiding Officer.
Assembly bills sent back from Cabinet. Assembly laws brought back from Parliament. Petitions, papers.
Leader of Assembly Business.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. On behalf of the Secretary of Finance and Economy, I would like to lead the following papers. The Tobago House of Assembly monthly budget report as at the end of January 2020. The Tobago House of Assembly monthly budget report as at end of February 2020. And the Tobago House of Assembly monthly budget report as at end of March 2020.
Presentation of reports from Dispute Resolution Commission. Questions to secretaries. Questions for oral answer.
Minority Leader. Health, Wellness, and Family Development.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Question number 72, the Secretary of Health and Wellness and Family Development. Please
Secretary of Health,
indicate
Wellness,
the,
and Family Development.
please indicate the estimated cost and the source of funding for the proposed Roxborough Hospital.
Madam Presiding Officer, permit me to respond to the question on the order paper. In February 2019, the Urban Development Corporation of Trinidad and Tobago was mandated by the Division of Health, Wellness, and Family Development via Executive Council Note number 81 to project manage the construction of the Roxborough Health Facility. China Railway Construction Caribbean Company Limited, through open tender, was awarded the contract for the execution of the design, build, equip of the facility. The Tobago House of Assembly, through further stakeholder consultations, requested UDCOT to fully equip an independent hospital to service the healthcare needs of the people of Tobago East and environs. And when I speak of Tobago East, I'm talking from Goodwood all the way up to Charlottesville and then Northside Tobago. The Roxborough Hospital project will include an accident and emergency wing, primary care services, operating theater, wards, dialysis unit, intensive care unit, delivery room, pharmacy, hyperbaric unit, helipad, and an independent biomedical and an automical waste management system, mortuary, and an administrative suite of offices and conference room. It is scheduled to be completed in July 2020, and the installation and the commissioning of equipment is scheduled to take place by September 2020, and this is after being contracted in February 2019. The estimated cost of the Roxborough Hospital is $87,826,203.85, VAT inclusive. And as I would have, the project is being funded by UDCOT, which is the Urban Development Corporation of Trinidad and Tobago, in collaboration with the Ministry of Finance and the Tobago House of Assembly.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Question number 73 to the Chief Secretary and Secretary for Tourism, Culture and Transportation as it relates to the newly opened Roxborough Police Station. Please provide A, the original estimated completion time and cost of construction and outfitting. B, the updated completion time and cost of construction and outfitting.
Madam Presiding Officer, please permit me to respond to this question at the next sitting.
Minority Leader. The Secretary of Settlements, Urban Renewal, and Public Utilities.
Madam Presiding Officer, I anticipated that response. Nevertheless, question number 474 to the Secretary of Settlements, Urban Renewal and Public Utilities, as it relates to the Belgarden land development and Plymouth land development projects, please indicate A, the date the projects commenced, B, the original estimated completion dates and cost of each project, C, the updated estimated completion dates and cost of each project. I thank you, Madam Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. As it relates to the Belgarden land development project, that project commenced in September 2012. With regards to the original estimate, it was estimated at $21 million, and the updated cost and completion date is September 2020 at an estimated cost of $32 million. As it relates to Plymouth land development, the Division of Settlement is not aware of a Plymouth land development.
Clerk of the Assembly. Clerk of the Assembly.
Request for leave to move the adjournment of the Assembly on definite matters of urgent public importance, statements by secretaries or assistant secretaries, personal explanations, introduction of bills, motions relating to the business or sittings of the Assembly, and moved by a secretary or assistant secretary. Public business, private business, motion.
Minority Leader.
Madam Presiding Officer, I thank you for the opportunity to present such timely motion. The motion reads, whereas the Tobago House of Assembly, THA, in its current legal form, has limited powers as outlined in the Tobago House of Assembly Act 40 of 1996, as recently manifested in 1, the THA being required to write to the Prime Minister seeking permission to urgently reopen the Studley Park Quarry as indicated by the Prime Minister on Saturday, 16th May 2020. 2, the THA being unwilling and unable to employ lateral thinking and actions relating to the COVID-19 health finance policies for Tobago separate and apart from cabinet in Trinidad. And whereas Tobago was once an independent state with unique political heritage, and whereas the people of Tobago since 1980 have legislatively pursued without success the level of self-governance autonomy that it desires within the unitary state of Trinidad and Tobago, be it resolved that within 3 months of the passing of this motion, a THA team comprising both members of the Executive Council and the Minority Council engage the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in pursuance of the THA obtaining full legislative independence on the areas of responsibility under the 5th schedule of the THA Act 40 of 1996. Be it further resolved that the said engagement also pursue the THA having control without the intervention of the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago of the services administered in Tobago outlined in the 7th schedule of the THA Act of 1996. Madam Presiding Officer, allow me to break this down into digestible bites for all and sundry. We have come here today to move a motion that will lay aside the partisan politics, the red side and the black side. And to unite Tobago with the hope of actually doing the work that the late great A.N.R. Robinson contemplated when he moved the motion for self-government in 1977. We have come today to place Tobago side by side with Trinidad. We are tired of being treated and being rated as glorified little boys and little girls in an assembly, speaking to themselves for laughs, moving motions as if they were asking Miss for an excuse to use the restroom, but unable to conduct the business of Tobago in accordance with the wishes and desires of all Tobagonians. Madam Presiding Officer, I came here this afternoon a little bit perturbed by the fact that from 1980 to 2020, count the years with me, we'll go in 10. 1980 to 1990, 10 years. 1990 to 2000, 10 years. To 2010, 10 years. 2010 to 2020, 40 years. It has been 40 years since this assembly has been established. And during those 40 years, we have not been able to have any single bill become a law. Now, I don't know if something is wrong with our mental faculties here, that we can't prepare a bill so it becomes a law, or something is wrong with the system in which we are caught up, that when the bills get to Trinidad, it does not materialize into a law. Or maybe we do not come up with the ideas regular enough, so there's insufficient bills going to Trinidad, and those that have gone are just simply bad. In this 40 years, based on my recollection, The House of Assembly have tried under the PNM, maybe on two occasions, to send bills to Trinidad. The last one was the constitutional amendment and the caveat in that is a push for, well, I will say self-government, Tobago. Went to Trinidad in the year 2018, if I'm to be corrected. Today, it's a joke on some joint select committee. We saw that when the state was ready to bring in new money, they operated as if it was new money. There was an urgency of now. There was a hush in the streets as new money was dusted out and placed in the coffers of central government. But when we beg and we beseech on behalf of the people that live within Tobago for a law that will allow us to represent them well, my friends, who generally sit opposite me, but I can't sit opposite me today, my friends in the PNM, my friends in the Executive Council, the PNM side, they know how to stick and stay on a point. Nothing could be more hurtful than the fact that in that 40 years, Robinson died. And though he moved the motion in 1977, and his hope was that in his lifetime, even though he would not have been in the parliament, he would have seen it come through, he died without seeing it come through. And I recall Dr. Winston Murray, man of noble character, great courage, and a mind of a giant. He too passed away. And this house had planned to honor him. And still today, they can't even honor him. But that's what we get for governance when my colleagues are in power. That's what we get for governance. They can't answer questions. What they're good at is twirling their thumbs as little boys who are waiting on mama and papa to come with gifts or an answer or to tell them what to do. That's how they're sitting here. I feel as if I'm disgraced by the fact that the House of Assembly has been set up to fail Tobagonians. And when I say that, I want to point you to Section 25 of the House of Assembly Act. I don't have all my notes in speaking orders, but my memory is quite sharp. That speaks of the powers of the Assembly. The Assembly's main role is to create policy. Policy for the governance and direction of Tobago. And they list a particular schedule, Schedule 5, that lists 33 areas under which the House of Assembly is responsible. Things like education, health, and you could talk about sports, land valuation, a number of stuff. 33 areas. We have not been able to make any law in Tobago, nor any policy. We have not made one policy in Tobago in the last 40 years for any of those areas. This is disgraceful. But they are squabbling for power. According to Bob Marley, see them fighting for power? Bob Marley say that. He says, see them fighting for power. And that's what I'm seeing. I squabble for power. And they look at me with angel smile, but dagger in their waist. Dagger in their waist. This is what this house have come to, Madam Presiding Officer. A house of torture, a house of ridicule, a disgraceful house. We have not moved. We have not passed one single policy within this house of Assembly, not one policy since the establishment of the House of Assembly in 1980. 40 long years, but I came to tell you that I'm a Bible-believing man. I didn't say a Bible-living man. I'm a Bible-believing man because there's none righteous. And the Bible says the children of Israel wandered. Yes, they wandered. They wandered in the wilderness, and I could feel the darkness of this place, the coldness, and I could sometimes, I'm bothered by the scorpions that live around me, stinging with the tail. Wow, I had to look out for the tail, stinging in the tail. It's not in the front, even though you look as if you have fins in the front. The sting is always in the tail. This wilderness, for 40 years we have been here. But I came to tell Tobago something. I came to put on the records today, Madam Presiding Officer. I could see the light at the end of this tunnel. I could see the River Jordan being parted. And I know homecoming. We are going on the next side. We are going over to the promised land. I say call the election now and let's settle this. Because if for 40 years we can't pass one policy, if for 40 years we can't pass one bill that becomes law, then it's a disgraceful place to be. If you can't do the job, give somebody else the job to do. Because this is no job for any child king. This is a job for a man. Someone who's in charge. Someone who knows his direction. Someone who could answer questions. Someone who could answer questions. And Madam Presiding Officer, I'll ask you for your protection today because I know people in, so I am hoping, I'm hearing some jackals, but they're not people. But definitely, I want you to protect me today, Madam Presiding Officer. Just in case any jackals sneak up inside here to attack me, I beg your protection. So we have come today to place on the agenda for another time the importance for this to be House of Assembly to make laws, independent of Trinidad. And I am not going to be long today. I'm not going to be bothered today. I want to be short today because when you speak short, people remember. When you speak long, they forget. I'm going to point out to you 3 areas. 3 areas, and then I'm going to wrap up the rest and I come back. In fact, 3 countries that has made good on leadership. And I ask the Prime Minister of this country to take a look at these countries. One, I will go to the United States of America, and I will pull out a little state called Nebraska. Then I will go over to Germany, and I'll pull out a little state called Hamburg. And I'll end with one of the newest states that has now become part of China, Hong Kong. In all of those, I will show you one country operating with 2 systems. Madam Presiding Officer, Nebraska, like the Tobago House of Assembly, has a unicameral system. For those who don't know, a unicameral system is a single chamber system. It's one where you have one level. There are no upper floor and lower floor. No upper house, lower house. It's one floor in Nebraska. And they like it that way. One, it's a more direct approach to the passing of laws. They said that we have a unicameral system. Some people feel it can't work. It can work. This unicameral system can work because it's working for Nebraska. In Nebraska, the unicameral, the legislative, parliament rather, they call it a parliament in Nebraska. They have 2 chances to debate the bill. 2 chances. There's a first reading, it goes to a committee. A second reading, it goes to a committee, and then the final reading. But the important thing about Nebraska is that when the laws are passed inside Nebraska's parliament, it is the governor who gives assent to it. The governor is responsible for the executive council. All right? For the executive, rather. And I wondered to myself if a system like that can't work here. Why we have to go to Trinidad for a president in Trinidad to pass a bill? Maybe that's the sticking point. When you have two chambers, this one have to pass it, then have to go up and they could send it back. It gets lost, people becomes confused, people get worried. This is our problem with Trinidad. Nebraska model works. I'm speaking about one country, the United States, two systems. That in every single state, there is a system. In every single state, there is a system. Every single state. Some have, well, the majority of the 50 states, 49 of them have bicameral systems. Nebraska has a unicameral system. And it works perfectly. They don't want another system. They reject the bicameral system. Can this work as it is? Yes, it can work. We need to speak to Trinidad. And this is why my first resolution is that we should form a joint THA team. Not a PNM team, not a PDP team, but let's form a joint team. Put the politics aside. And let's go down in the name of Tobago and say to Trinidad, look, we are tired of trying this system that you have out in the Act here. Because the House of Assembly Act states that we could make policy, but subject to 75(1) of the Constitution. And what 75(1) simply states is that the executive in Trinidad, the cabinet in Trinidad, runs the government. And nothing, it runs the government of Trinidad and Tobago. So in substance, the section that gives the Tobago House of Assembly powers is the same section that takes away the powers. It says to us, you can make policy on these 33 areas, and the list is long and a nice list. Forestry, agriculture, a number of things, education, health, whatever. But it is subject to the policies of the cabinet. And nothing you say can go against the cabinet. So if we say in Tobago that we want to have an airport built in Charlottesville, and the executive or the cabinet says no, then the answer is no. That's our problem. If we say we want self-government, we want to have these powers in self-government, and the cabinet says no, the answer is no. In other words, when the PNM talk, no talk back. That is a catchphrase from somewhere I read. That's not good for Tobago. We have to be in charge. I read somewhere, the next place I'm going to speak about is Hamburg. And in Germany, it is said that the authority, all authority, is derived by the people of the state. So Hamburg is a state in the Federal Republic of Germany. And in that state, as all states, it is the people that decide. They are the ultimate authority. In Tobago, we could cry, we could haul, we could hem. It is the cabinet in Trinidad that decides. And if the cabinet is against us, we are in trouble. But again, some people are not worried about that. As Bob Marley say, see them fighting for power. They know not the hour. But I'm presiding officer in Hamburg. Hamburg doesn't have a governor. In Hamburg, there is a parliament, of course. They call it a parliament. It's also a unicameral system. But the head of the government in Hamburg is a mayor. Strange. But this is the kind of thing that people decide for themselves. And this is why we are saying we need to have a democratic approach to governance in our THA. where people are involved in making decisions. They can't tell us what they want for us. We, the people, must decide what we want. And if we say we want that, Trinidad have no right second guessing us. That's our problem. And so, when they elect this mayor again is responsible for passing all laws. When a law is made in that unicameral system, it comes before the mayor, and the mayor passed the law. Those laws are for Hamburg and its people. Tobago doesn't have that. When you make it, send it to Trinidad to see if somebody see it is good enough. Wow. I want to rush on to the last place. Hong Kong. One country, two systems. Hong Kong had been with China for quite a long, long time. Had been with the British for years, since the 1800s. They had been under British control. However, in 1983, they began to give way to China taking charge of Hong Kong. But they had not just turned their backs on Hong Kong, they ensured they left certain things in place. Today, Hong Kong is modernized, and they don't have a parliament. What they have is a legislative council, and it is unicameral. We have a unicameral system here. They could have looked at the bicameral system. They could have invented something else. They could have called their system a parliament, or an assembly, or the people's house. But the people of Hong Kong decided that they will call it a legislative council. In that legislative council, the head of business there, or the head of the cabinet, so to speak, is called the chief executive. Not the mayor, not the governor, not a chief secretary, not a president, not a prime minister, not a premier, but they have chosen their own name, because that's what democracy is about, allowing the people to decide. And when they decide, where it drop is stop, where it hang is swing. I don't know, we have to write something, send it to Trinidad, to have them look at it, and then tell us no. That's what we have been encouraging here for 40 years. But the chief executive officer has a lot of powers in Hong Kong. You see, in Hong Kong is exclusively responsible for what goes on in Hong Kong. China have no say with what goes on in Hong Kong. This is why when they wanted to pass that extradition law, the young people got up and they reached riot in the place. Because they knew what they were defending. What they were defending was the Constitution. What they were defending. Today when I speak about Tobago having its own constitution, people revile the idea. Those on the red side. And I understand, because I understand the ability to not think outside the box. But we need to have our own constitution. We need to say to our children, this is what constitutes Tobago. And we don't just need an act. We need to have a Tobago constitution. Hamburg has its own constitution. Nebraska has its own constitution. Yes. And Hong Kong has its own constitution. This is what constitutes Hong Kong. And they make it. They make it. The House of Assembly Act was not made by us, It was made for us. So they put what they want to put inside and passed it. They must now give us a chance to create the House of Assembly we want and have us pass it. In China, the chief executive officer in China is responsible for good governance on a whole. He signs all law. So when the China Legislative Council sit down and they pass a law, he's the final signature. But he doesn't escape, because the Constitution allows that if 1/4 of the Legislative Council, and there are 70 members, 35 elected, and 35 come from areas of interest, 70 members in the Hong Kong area. And if 1/4 of those Legislative Council members decide that they want to lay a charge against the chief executive, and it reminds me of people trying to lay a charge against a certain man inside here, who I cannot see for the life of day since he has resigned. It seems as if he has demitted office also. I've not seen him for a while. I've not heard any reports whether or not he's on vacation or not. But I keep looking for him. I keep looking for him. The chief executive officer in Hong Kong cannot escape unscathed. If 1/4 of the persons making up the 70 rights charging him with something, he could resign immediately. And if he doesn't resign, they could then press the button and go on with a process that will see the judiciary, and that's another thing that's independent to both, well, to all three. Nebraska has its own judiciary. Yeah. Hamburg has its own judiciary system. Hong Kong has its own judiciary system. Yeah. And if they activate the judiciary, and the judiciary now acts as an independent body, and they lay charges against this person, and they conduct an impeachment, and 2/3 person vote, he has to go. They have a system in place. That's their system. They choose their system. What do we have in place? We want to move our chief secretary. What do we have in place? The gangster man, the frightening man, the bully man. I'm not saying that happened here. I'm just saying what we have in place. The embarrassed man is a human being. It's one of us. You know, I'm just asking myself, if we were allowed to govern ourselves, Madam President Officer, I'm hearing some grumbling down there. I'm not sure if it is human beings or what, but please protect me here today. I'm hearing some grumbling again. People need to understand they cannot talk behind your mask. Take your mask off. Let's see you for who you are. Take your mask off. Don't hide behind your mask and grumble. Look at me. I have my mask off. You can hear me. So, Madam Presiding Officer, I'm here to say I'm embarrassed to be in a house like this. Because after 40 years, we have not made one policy to govern Tobago. This house have not made one policy. But you know what? There's another place called Port of Spain City Corporation. Under the Municipal Corporation Act, Section 221 to 225, somewhere around there, you will find where they can make bylaws. And when they make the bylaws, you can't change it, you know. No. So if they say no spitting in Port of Spain, that's the law. It doesn't go to Parliament. They pass the bylaw, it then goes to the President, she assents to it, and that's it. Powerful indeed. Powerful indeed. But this glorified house has become a house of shame and torture because we have not been able to make one policy inside this house for Tobago. And I challenge those who come after me. Go ahead, Madam Presiding Officer.
Member, you have 10 more minutes of speaking time.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. I will not use it then. I'm very quick on my feet today. I wish to challenge those who will come after me to speak the truth and tell us what policy they have made for Tobago and how was that policy made. Let the truth be spoken of here today. How much bills that they passed here that became law in Trinidad. And they must say if they are satisfied with the system. Because the system we seek here today is a system that says we must have full legislative responsibility for all items under the 5th schedule and all items under the 7th schedule. I think this is what we have right here. All items under the 5th schedules and all items under the 7th schedule. Those under the 7th schedule are those things in Trinidad where they have a service across here I'm saying we don't want Trinidad to perform more service across here. We're capable of cut it off. Let us run all services here. Things under the 6th schedule that the president is responsible for, we leave it as that for a while. But under the 5th and 7th schedule, no, cut it off. Madam President, prepare for the march. And I want to tell all the religious bodies in Tobago, prepare to take the front in this battle. Because it's not flesh and blood we're fighting with, but principalities. I thank you, Madam Presiding Officer.
Members, the question is, whereas the Tobago House of Assembly, THA, in its current legal form, has limited powers as outlined in the Tobago House of Assembly Act 40 of 1996, as recently manifested in the THA being required to write to the Prime Minister seeking permission to urgently reopen the Studley Park quarry, as indicated by the Prime Minister on Saturday, 16 May 2020. The THA being unwilling and unable to employ lateral thinking and actions relating to COVID-19 health and finance policies for Tobago, separate and apart from the cabinet in Trinidad. And whereas Tobago was once an independent state with a unique political heritage, and whereas the people of Tobago since 1980 have legislatively pursued without success the level of self-governance autonomy that it desires within the unitary state of Trinidad and Tobago. Be it resolved that within 3 months of the passing of this motion, a THA team comprising both members of Executive Council and the Minority Council engage the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in pursuance of the THA, obtaining full legislative independence on the areas of responsibility under the 5th schedule of the THA Act 40 of 1996. Be it further resolved that the said engagement also pursue the THA, having control without the intervention of the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago of the services administered in Tobago outlined in the 7th schedule of the THA Act 40 of 1996. Leader of Assembly Business.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, 2020, and you know, I've always been a student of history. My grandfather, a curator of the museum. And 2020 is going to be one of those years, Madam Presiding Officer, that generations later, students of history are going to look back and wonder what happened. I mean, we are only just over 100 days into the year, but already we've had a mass fire in Australia. We've had the death of a basketball great. We've had close to World War III. We've had the almost impeachment of another US president. And of course, we've had the COVID-19 virus. And some persons, and there are many memes going around saying cancel 2020, because you see 2020 as a tragedy. And today, Madam Presiding Officer, I think we have to put this as another red letter day. Another tragedy when the students of history from Tobago look back at this day and they say, for sure, we have a failed minority. For sure, we have people who are clueless about what is happening in the Tobago space. Madam Presiding Officer, this motion and even the ramblings of the minority leader are clear evidence that they have absolutely no clue, not a single iota of an idea of what is happening in Tobago. Madam Presiding Officer, this motion is counter the motion that we had on the 13th sitting, where we spoke to supporting a particular process. And we decided to support that process because the people of Tobago had spoken loudly, resoundingly, clearly that they want something. And that something, Madam Presiding Officer, is the right to self-determination, greater autonomy, self-governance. And through that, Madam Presiding Officer, a system would have been set up and persons would have been consulted for hours, Madam Presiding Officer. As a matter of fact, Madam Presiding Officer, for 4 years, over 20 venues, 100 hours, 120 written submissions, 6,000 persons said very clearly what we want for Tobago. And then somebody go in a rum shop, talk to some fellas, buy them some drinks, and come and bring a motion here for us. Clearly, this is rum shop politics that we are talking. When we are looking at a motion that speaks to giving us full legislative independence over the fifth schedule, areas under the fifth schedule. Madam Presiding Officer, the people of Tobago have dreamt long and hard about their dream home, what their dream house. And I want to share a personal story, Madam Presiding Officer, if you allow me. I remember in my teenage years, my family, we were just about to build a home, and we spoke a lot about that home. My father, my mother, my 3 siblings, we spoke extensively about what this home would look like. We dreamt about this home. And during that time, Madam Presiding Officer, my grandmother passed away, and we moved into our home because of my parents. Both teachers didn't make a lot of money, so we had to save on rent. And we lived in a small 2-bedroom home where the 4 offspring shared 1 bedroom, small bedroom, and the parents in another bedroom. Very small and humble home. And Madam Presiding Officer, again, it was just over the road in Mariah that we were building the house. And could you imagine, Madam Presiding Officer, one day my father came on and said, well, folks, we're not going to build that dream house that we've been talking about for such a long time, that we've been planning for. We're just going to add on an extra bedroom in the back and put in another toilet, and we're good to go. And Madam Presiding Officer, this is what this motion is proposing. It is robbing Tobagonians of their dream, their hard-earned dream, what we deserve and what we have put out there that we want, very clearly that this is what we want. And again, Madam Presiding Officer, some people playing smart with stupidness. And it's very clear that a couple of things are actually happening here. First things first, this is a deliberate attempt to hoodwink the people of Tobago ahead of a couple of elections. Some persons are parading all over the place talking about independence for Tobago, independence for Tobago. And then they come inside of here and they want to give you a piecemeal type of approach to dealing with the issue. Madam Presiding Officer, it reminds me of a story my grandmother told me that some time ago, a couple of years ago, this man said he was going to swim to Trinidad. And when he dive in the water, he jump on a boat and who jump on a jet ski, and they take a ride to Trinidad, and then they say they swim to Trinidad. That is not what the people want. They're trying to hoodwink the people with those types of Houdini acts that I'm going to say I will do this, and then I actually do that. And I spoke recently about the minority living in a fantasy world chasing unicorns and leprechauns. And it is sad and clear that that is what is happening, because for the minority leader to stand here and speak about Hong Kong on a day where China just passed a law that the people of Hong Kong are saying infringes on their rights. They just passed that law today. We are speaking about it in the international news. Tune into CNN, and the minority leader comes and quotes Hong Kong as the place we shoshould follow. The people have spoken about, he is trying to give examples of a federal system of governance, and Tobagonians have had these discussions. And I don't know that anyone around this horseshoe needs another lesson in unicameral versus bicameral. We all could type in the words in Google and it would come up. So those efforts that you would have put in probably weren't good enough. And I probably understand what happened because the member for Palliative Lansing Space, I came in a little late, so you probably couldn't copy his homework so that you could have spoken something that sounded a lot like it made sense. And clearly, that is what we are left with. And Madam Presiding Officer, I really want to deal with a couple of things very clearly. In 1977, the late great A.N.R. Robinson would have piloted a motion, yes, and that would have led to the 1980 bill for the THA to be reconvened. And at the time, what was envisioned was not what was produced. And then we came down to 1996, where the THA is formed as it is now. And Madam Presiding Officer, quite rightly as the minority leader, probably a broken clock is right at least twice per day. Section 75(1) outlines very clearly that Cabinet has dominance over the Tobago House of Assembly, and it's something that Tobagonians have said they do not want. As a matter of fact, there are some things that Tobagonians said that they want very clearly. They want equality of status. We want lawmaking powers, self-determination, greater participation in governance. We would want equality of opportunities, and of course, greater fiscal independence. Tobagonians said they wanted that. Nowhere in this motion is that mentioned. Nowhere did the minority leader speak to these things. But he comes here and try and cannot tell the difference between a policy and a law. Good sir, since Google failed you on that occasion, a policy is anything that a government chooses to do or not to do. A law is what a general standard by which society has to abide. And it is enforceable in the court of law. I'm sure you're very familiar with that part at least. So to say here that there has been no policies is nothing short of a fallacy. There have been many policies that the Tobago House of Assembly has adopted over the years, especially under the PNM administration, to ensure that Tobago is developed in a particular way. So to come and say that is again another attempt to hoodwink and fool people, but I can say this, you're quoting Bob Marley, you could fool some people sometimes, but you can't fool all the people all the time. Tobagonians are onto you, and I just want to put something else that Tobagonians need to be onto. Because one of the challenges that the PNM government faces in Trinidad in ensuring that we realize internal self-government for Tobago is that they are going to need the support of the opposition UNC. And the rumblings have been that the UNC ain't going to pass it. As a matter of fact, and it's one of the good things about attending university in Trinidad, a friend of mine from university who happens to be part of that organization gave me a heads up. And the person said, Kwesi, look out. They're going to try to undermine the internal self-government issue. And then I live to see today where the minorities bring in a motion like this to say that they want is almost partial independence that does not speak to internal self-government. It is nothing more than the UNC handlers in Trinidad have given them an instruction to come to this house to try to mislead and hoodwink Tobago and Tobagonians. And it is a sad day when the influence of the UNC again is coming back to the Tobago House of Assembly, and it reminds me of the Green Paper and the proposals of the Green Paper. The Green Paper that was meant to be oppressive to Tobagonians, that the UNC tried to hurry through Parliament in 2013 because they wanted to campaign on it. Again, we hear with the same thing. Same script, different cast. I don't know which one is the pumpkin man. One already have a big house in Mariah, so I don't know who wants to build the house from the pumpkin and the cucumber now. Same script, different cast. The UNC puppets at play again. And Madam Presiding Officer, I just want to look at this motion and again demonstrate to the people of Tobago that this is a failed minority who has absolutely no clue about what is happening. Madam Presiding Officer, the motion speaks to the Prime Minister speaking about the urgent reopening of the study park quarry. According to the health ordinance, Madam Presiding Officer, which is enforced by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, there are certain things that we have to abide by, and nowhere, not in the 5th schedule for sure, does the Tobago House of Assembly have any law or any power over the police service. So to say that we run into somebody to go ahead is ridiculous. I will leave the other part about the unwillingness and inability to employ lateral thinking as regards to COVID to my colleague, Councillor, the Secretary for Health, Wellness and Family Development, because she can speak for hours about the great work that the PNM administration in Tobago and in Trinidad have been doing. The other part of the motion, again, Madam Presiding Officer, my grandfather is probably rolling in his grave. And whereas Tobago was once an independent state, I don't know where that was written. I would love to know where the minority found that piece of information. Tobago, after it was finally settled, or it was agreed that it's a British colony, Tobago became a ward of Trinidad and Tobago, starting in 1883, and then in 1889, we became a ward of Trinidad and Tobago. There was never a time in our history, even when we had our own legislature, our own exchequer, that Tobago was considered an independent state. Again, Google should be your best friend, Mr. Minority Leader. And the reality is, Madam Presiding Officer, the minority has absolutely no right, and especially the elected members of the minority, they know that they have absolutely no right to come here and speak about independence in any way, form, or fashion, because Tobagonians, their constituents, the members of the electoral district, never gave them the go-ahead to do that. They never got the mandate to come here and speak about that. And what's worse, Madam Presiding Officer, is that they are parading again and trying to mislead and misdirect people. Madam Presiding Officer, the 33 areas under the 5th schedule of the Tobago House of Assembly Act outline many different areas. Many different areas, yes. But how is it that we want to achieve full legislative independence without taking control of the areas under the 6th schedule? Madam Presiding Officer, the minority is clueless. They have not an iota of an idea, and I just want to speak to the fact that we still need the support. We still need the support of the Auditor General, the judiciary, if we are speaking about full legislative independence. And the reality is, Madam Presiding Officer, the internal self-government bill was very clear. We went through a lot of detail to say these are the things. As a matter of fact, they changed up the schedules completely. It's no longer about the areas that Tobago are responsible for. But the new bill, as a matter of fact, says very clearly, these are the areas that Tobago is no longer responsible for. It means then that every other area falls under the responsibility of the Tobago House of Assembly. And that is what the people of Tobago want. They do not want a piecemeal approach to internal self-government. That is not what they want, and that is not what they have said very clearly over and over again that they are desirous of. As a matter of fact, to try to do that is to tell somebody, well, you know, one of your son came to you and said, Daddy, I would like a car. I need to get to work far. And then they say, all right, son, don't worry, I'll fix you up. And then next day, you get a shiny new bicycle. Tobagonians didn't ask for that. We want a vehicle that is robust enough, a vehicle that ensures that Trinidad and Tobago are truly side by side. We stand side by side. We want the ability to make laws. We want the ability to borrow. We want the ability to say, this is our space. Let us define the space of Trinidad and Tobago within the context of the Unitary Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. That is what Tobagonians want. And if you didn't know, now you know. So when we sat here around the horseshoe for the 13th sitting, and we agreed that we are going to give support to the Forum of Political Leaders, and the member for Palliative Lansing Speyside made a presentation in Roxborough. I had the pleasure of making a presentation in Scarborough to the people to say this is where we are. The next step is the Joint Select Committee, and we're going to continue to, again, re-engage and reignite the fire. The minority was a part of that. And yet they're coming here and trying to hoodwink Tobagonians. And Madam Presiding Officer, I want to say very clearly, and I don't intend to be too long because this motion to me is utterly useless. It is garbage. It is inane. It is, I don't even want to say vacuous. But the reality is, Madam Presiding Officer, Tobagonians have demonstrated very clearly what their desires are. They have stated that they are willing to go through the process of pursuing internal self-government using the vehicle that was proposed. They have given us a resounding mandate, and this is all of Tobago, all of Tobagonians, all of the politicians. And what I expect the minority to come here to say is how they are going to convince their UNC counterparts to ensure that the bill is passed when it appears before cabinet, before Parliament. And Madam Presiding Officer, this is not an issue of red or black or yellow, as some people might be hiding under their shirts. But this is a matter for all of Tobago. Madam Presiding Officer, the issue of internal self-government is not a toy to place in the hands of a child. This is a long-standing issue, and the right to self-determination is something that each and every Tobagonian wants, whether they even know it or not. Every single Tobagonian, all 60 or 65,000, depending on how you want to count, know that they want the ability to determine their own destinies. And we never ask for independence because there's a difference between autonomy and independence. You can achieve autonomy without independence. And the discussion of independence has been taken off of the table a long time ago. Madam Presiding Officer, it is an insult to the members of this honorable House that this motion is even before us right now. It is a greater insult to the people of Tobago that we have to be here and they have to listen to the deliberations on a motion such as this that should have been shut down the moment it came up by the rum shop. Madam Presiding Officer, there's a particular member of this House who loves to speak about feeling like they wasted time by coming here. Madam Presiding Officer, I get that feeling. I get that feeling that this is a precious waste of our time during a period when COVID is threatening us and we're doing a great job to restart and get the economy moving again. Madam Presiding Officer, those are the discussions we should be having. We should have been discussing even further the great initiatives that the Tobago House of Assembly has put in place for getting the tourism sector moving and small businesses moving and the agricultural sector moving. That is what we should have been discussing here today. Instead, we're here talking about adding on a room to the back of the old house and a bicycle when we need a motor car. Madam Presiding Officer, as I take my seat, I just want to say that there's no possible way that anyone with any type of sensibility about them can truly support this motion. I thank you.
Minority Councillor.
Good afternoon to the presiding officer. Good afternoon to the members of this House. Good afternoon to everyone who is viewing these proceedings outside of this House because of the situation that we are in today. Madam Presiding Officer, I sat there and listened with pride as my political leader and the member for Belgarden, Roxborough Delaford, speak about other parts of the world where things are done differently in an effort to highlight the fact that our way isn't the only way, and in an effort to highlight the fact that if we collectively think about everything that is happening to us, if we collectively think about what Tobago and Tobagonians have been asking for the longest while, that we can re-engineer the world that we currently live in. I was extremely proud, and it made me even think further than where I have been thinking about as it relates to this. Unfortunately, Madam Presiding Officer, that was followed with the same rhetoric, the same link everything that is not PNM to UNC in an effort to use race to make us all afraid. And instead of us critically sitting and listening and saying, you know, this is what is good for Tobago, we are willing to take instructions from those who obviously do not care about Tobago. And we are willing, unfortunately, to come here and to continue that kind of modern-day slavery, almost, to stand in line with the Trinidad-based, Trinidad-led party. But it is what it is. I don't know that those around the shoe horse expected, the horseshoe expected any different. And I am also not sure that those who are listening to us and those who understand that the Tobago House of Assembly has been around for 40 years. When I came back to Tobago, Madam Presiding Officer, in 2007, all of the discussions about how we want to get greater autonomy and whether we mean internal self-governance or whether we mean autonomy and whether we mean, or, you know, what I have gathered, and I am really, really happy that when the member before me spoke, he did not include me in his groupings of people who cannot say they represent what is on the ground. Because in 2007, when I came back, I actually worked with some of the entities that did the consultations before the Tobago House of Assembly realized that this was something, as in, no, let me rephrase that. Before the then PNM-led Tobago House of Assembly realized that this is what was the discussion happening out there, there were several groups doing the consultation on the ground. I participated in those. So I can stand here loudly, proudly stating that I represent those who attended those consultations. And what has happened between then and now is that the average Tobagonians is so sick and tired of us talking about this autonomy thing that they have turned off from it. That is what, Madam Presiding Officer, is happening to our Tobagonians right now. That is why when you try to raise the issue, they tell you, oh God, or you're coming again with that, or the entire talk about that. Look how long we're talking about that. I went to a consultation here, there, and everywhere, and I talked about it. I give it. That is why what you are seeing now, Madam Presiding Officer, is almost a disdain for the idea, because it's been beaten and it's been trampled on for so long that people really are sick and tired of it. And what we are doing, Madam Presiding Officer, is trying to allow Tobago, trying to allow this population that has been beaten and has been bruised about this issue for so long, and you are right, it has been a political football. Both the PNM and the UNC brings it up just before election, every single election. That is a fact. It has been a political football, and you all should be ashamed to be a part of this sitting and to be a part of that process again. You all should be very much ashamed to do that and to participate in that kind of continual enslavement of Tobagonians. Madam Presiding Officer, what we are trying to do is understanding that what is happening in Trinidad is PNM and UNC playing the fool with Tobago's lives, and realizing that what is happening in the Parliament, in the Joint Select Committee in Trinidad, is the fact that both of them would gang up against Tobagonians, because neither of those groups like or love Tobagonians. So what we are doing, Madam Presiding Officer, is allowing Tobagonians to think, okay, from the way them two down they singing, it is going to fail. So let us start rethinking. Let us start re-engineering. Let us start thinking about how we could possibly make this work. Because a change in the Tobago House of Assembly Act does not require a special majority. But what is happening down there now requires a special majority. And both PNM and UNC have probably sat and agreed down there that is salt for Tobago. So we have said, let us think about another way to get this done, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, we have to be conscious of the fact that the reality is there are things that affect Tobago in ways that it does not affect Trinidad. There are laws that affect Tobago in ways that they do not affect Trinidad. And if the Tobago House of Assembly had the authority to make the laws that affect us the way they do not affect Trinidad, we would put our citizens in a better position, Madam Presiding Officer. Let's think about this. A perfect example. Every single person who knows anything about farming would tell you that our Tobago farmers are crying out because the cockroaches, the pests, the cockroach, the agouti, all of these things that when we look at the Trinidad and Tobago laws, says right now we can't do anything about them. But in Tobago, we need to do something about those things because it is affecting us in a way that it is probably not affecting the farmers in Trinidad. And we need in Tobago, because the Tobago House of Assembly is responsible for food production, we should be able to say, yes, this is an issue. Let us make a law here that can work for us because it needs to work for us, Madam Presiding Officer. The political leaders spoke about the fact that the municipalities in Trinidad, they can make any bylaw basically. If they decide that you have to, if AREMA decides that you have to keep your grass less than a foot, AREMA can go around and make a bylaw and say your grass has to be less than a foot or we will charge you. And there is nothing that anybody else, Port of Spain, central government, nothing that they can do to change that for AREMA. That is a fact. We in Tobago, we have so many, we can't even make a law like that. Our public health does not even allow us to make a law like that, because we are in the Tobago House of Assembly. And what the Tobago House of Assembly Act says is that we have to debate it here, and then when we finish debating it here, we send it to cabinet, not even to the parliament. We send it to cabinet. Cabinet decides whether it's UNC or PNM. We don't care, because either of them don't care about we. They will do what they have been doing with the Tobago laws all of these years. Absolutely nothing. Spin top in mud. It gets lost. We're not even sure where it is in the legislative agenda right now. It's been, remember, and I am so glad, Madam Presiding Officer, that we spoke about that 13th that 13th sitting, because that was when, 2018? Was that in 2018? And we are now in 2020, 2 years later. You should be ashamed to say that 2 years later, with PNM in Tobago and PNM in Trinidad, it can't go nowhere yet. So don't come here with that kind of absolute, utter foolishness. We are sick and tired of that. Madam Presiding Officer, if we were to have legislative authority here, where we can decide what we are doing here, in addition to the things in the 7th schedule, Madam Presiding Officer, where those services are available here, we in Tobago could decide that we are not happy with, for example, the way the judicial system is working right now. Maybe because some of you all are living in a fancy world. You may never have had to go to the magistrate court and show up 8 o'clock in the morning, and show up 8 o'clock the next morning, and show up 8 o'clock a morning after that, because the magistrate can't come from Trinidad. We may be able to decide, we may decide here in Tobago that that is not working for us. So we want our own magistrates right here. We want our own judges and the entire system that makes up a judicial system. We want that here. We should be able to say as big people if that is what we need here, because what is happening now is absolutely not working. We should be able to do that. And again, it is so disappointing that people who were elected to represent Tobago are here standing up against something that they know Tobagonians have been clamoring for. All what, in the name of partisan politics? All to just get up and say, them said this, you said that, so you use a whole set of big words? Is that really what we taking the people's money to do in this place? Colossal waste of time. And yes, I am going to say it again. Today, because of what you are, and I'm sure the rest of you who are planning to come and speak from the majority side will continue with your rhetoric. But Tobagonians are not fooled. Tobagonians have heard the same talk over and over, probably bought it sometime before, but we ain't stupid over and over and over and over and over again. We will not continue to be beaten like that. Same thing also applies to the protective system. Madam Presiding Officer, I remember one of the few things that was actually sent from Tobago to Trinidad to become law was for the THA, the Tobago Assembly Security Services, something of that sort. And like the Tobago Autonomy Bill, it went in circles and it died a natural death. What this is saying is that we want to be able, if we say that that is what we need to do in Tobago, because we believe that, for example, having our own police here would make more sense than having to live with the rules and live with the policies of the TTPS. The same way, Madam Presiding Officer, Port of Spain have their own police. Arima have their own police. The same way we in Tobago should be able to say we would like to have our own police here following our principles, listening to the priorities of Tobago. Is that really so difficult to understand? Considering that that is what, if you had been listening to the people of Tobago all of these years, that is what they have been saying. So having an understanding, Madam Presiding Officer, that we are here knowing that those two big political parties in Trinidad ain't going to do nothing with the bill that down there. And we already see the playbook where they're already trying to lay that at the foot of PDP. And I don't understand for the life of me, Madam Presiding Officer, how everything that has not worked is suddenly the PDP's fault, even though the PDP has not been in power for anything. How is this the PDP's fault? So your coming with that rhetoric again is a colossal waste of time. And Tobagonians are sick and tired of the blame game. It is your counterparts in Trinidad that are in charge. It is your friend. So you should consider speaking to your friend who is a part of the Yellow Party and have them work on passing the bill that is there. Please do not come and try to lay this at the foot of the PDP at all. What we are doing, Madam Presiding Officer, is trying to come up with solutions that have the possibility of working. And as the member for Belgarden, Roxborough, Delafort said, what we are suggesting is that we collectively put partisan politics aside and let us both go down and negotiate as man with those in Trinidad as man and say, okay, we realize what's going on down there with that. Let us do this in the interim. Let us use the time that we have to do something that is better for Tobago. Madam Presiding Officer, that is all we are asking. That is all we are suggesting. And this is exactly what the people of Tobago have been clamoring for. So I would strongly suggest that we rethink the direction that this sitting is heading, and that we seriously consider that Tobagonians have been watching and have been waiting and have been clamoring and have been attending consultations and are sick and tired of the foolishness that happens inside this house. So we inside this house need to start growing up and do what we have been elected or selected to do. Madam Presiding Officer, I thank you.
Secretary of Health.
I thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Is it on? Yeah. Is it on, Madam Presiding Officer? Hearing me clearly? Right. Madam Presiding Officer, I thank you for the opportunity to speak in this motion and to give support to my colleague, the Leader of Assembly Business, and to complement basically his response to this motion. And as I sat there, I became very confused because I thought that there was a motion put before us for debate, and listening to the two contributors on the other side, I wondered whether they had studied even their own motion that they would have put forward today. But more than that, Madam Presiding Officer, I am confused with the wishes of the PDP. I am confused, I am perplexed with the articulation to the Tobago public and the position that they have taken with regards to treating with the whole issue of Tobago's autonomy. Yesterday, it was that they were in support of the autonomy for Tobago. 2 weeks ago, they were in support of cessation. And today, it is full legislative independence. But the thing is, all records show that the minority assemblyman participated in discussions throughout the length and breadth of Tobago on autonomy for Tobago and gave support to the fact that the Tobago people have said that this is what we want, self-determination. But today, that same minority is piloting a motion for full legislative independence based again on very flawed arguments and on a very flawed premise. And so for me, really and truly, it's not surprising because it's the same hodgepodge kind of fashion, the same hodgepodge way in which they manage the affairs of their party. And I'm sure we can all attest to that. Madam Presiding Officer, as I stand here, now is not the time for grandstanding and coming with efforts to seek out political mileage. I have been asking myself the question when I read the motion over and over, what will the team go down to Trinidad to do? The minority leader had an opportunity to be present at the Joint Select Committee to raise any objections or to give recommendations, but our records indicate that he was not present, or if it is at all that he happened to be there, he represented his trade union party. Is the mover of the motion aware that there are standards of operation guiding legislative changes to any act or any constitution? Is he aware? Is the mover of the motion aware that all of Tobago met to determine the type of relationship that they would want to see with Trinidad? All of Tobago, from Charlottesville right down to Canaan Bonaccord and over at North Side, indicated that what we want for Tobago is autonomy, not full independence, not cessation. And I've seen where I've read where persons have been asking questions. What is the minority leader really talking about when he pilots a motion, when he has discussions in the public domain about cessation for Tobago? Who is he speaking on behalf of? And so today, Madam Presiding Officer, I have reasoned, and I'm sure all of us in the public domain have reasoned, that the minority leader and his team cannot, in fact, be talking on behalf of the people of Tobago. Madam Presiding Officer, it really pains me to know that the mover of the motion and I are from the same parts of Tobago. But the thing is, the minority leader is not sufficiently schooled to give adequate representation to the people in that electoral district, more so the people of Tobago East. What is he talking about when he indicates to us in this August House that we have not passed any policy, not one policy? First, he started off saying that we have not passed any law, and then somewhere in the argument he got very lost because I suspect the discussion is over his head. And so he started talking about policy and started mixing up policy and laws. But Madam Presiding Officer, as the leader of assembly business would have indicated, a policy is basically a set of guidelines or a set of rules which would determine a particular course of action. And so I'm not sure that the minority leader understands the difference between what a policy is and what law is. Madam Presiding Officer, the minority leader has failed in his own motion. He has not delivered. When you listen to the motion, there is no research, emotive arguments which are basically unfounded, and a presentation which lacks any coherence or any substance. Madam Presiding Officer, policies have been made by this PNM administration daily, and they do not require any approval from this House. They do not require any approvals from cabinet. So what really is the minority leader talking about in his contribution? This PNM administration has stated several policies over the years, and we have been working towards implementing those policies to ensure that our people can live more meaningful lives. We have enacted policies to have community centers in each electoral district, policies to decentralize healthcare, policies to have extended hours of play, hence the reason why we have lights on playing fields today. Policies, Madam Presiding Officer, throughout the length and breadth of Tobago. So what is the minority leader indicating, Madam Presiding Officer? Moving forward to Trinidad and Tobago, Madam Presiding Officer, in situations where there is a crisis such as the one we are facing now, the argument cannot be about control. The argument cannot be about who is the bigger boss and whether we should go down to Trinidad fighting. The argument has to be about working together to protect the lives of our citizenry. And so when I looked at the motion, I was confused because it's referenced the Prime Minister making statements on behalf of, or giving permission with regards to Studley Park. It referenced that we have not engaged in lateral thinking when it comes to finance and COVID-19. And none of the previous speakers spoke anything to what is written in this document here today, Madam Presiding Officer. And so that is what makes it now very difficult for anybody coming behind them to give a meaningful contribution, because what they have actually written here, they have gone off course. Madam Presiding Officer, and so for me, the timing of this motion is vexatious. The content coming forward from the minority side is vacuous, Madam Presiding Officer. And what we are doing here today, Madam Presiding Officer, is in fact wasting meaningful time. How can the concern at this time be who has authority to open the query, or whether lateral ways of thinking have been considered? The last thing that this administration will do is to be caught up in any power struggle at this time. But the time for power struggles, of course, we will come to that. I have observed, Madam Presiding Officer, that the minority is fixated with power and with a hurried approach to enacting laws and with full legislative independence. I reason that they wish to use it to ban and strike down all the eaters of pork and to try to enforce all the nonsense put out there on the social media. Madam Presiding Officer, I am very grateful that the coordinated approach has brought benefits for all of us. I am very grateful that with the coordinative approach, we have been able to deliver on behalf of the people here in Tobago and by extension, Trinidad and Tobago. And there will be times, Madam Presiding Officer, when there is need to collaborate, and there are times, Madam Presiding Officer, when there are times when, Madam Presiding Officer, there is the need to ensure that we have a Tobago-centric approach to treating with the issues that are in front of us. It is no secret, Madam Presiding Officer, that this PNM administration believes that Tobago is ready for the next step to greater autonomy. In fact, it is indeed curious that this motion seems to imply that greater autonomy is being promulgated by the opposition. That is not so, Madam Presiding Officer. I don't know whether I should be dismayed. I don't know whether I should be impressed by the audacity of the Minority Council to imply that the idea for autonomy, greater autonomy for Tobago, is their idea. And they are the ones fighting out there. The People's National Movement has been leading the fight on behalf of self-determination for Tobago. And so I am amazed that you would even attempt to push to misguide the people. I am certain that you are aware that it is well documented, that since the 1980s, the PNM administration has been assiduously and carefully taking steps to move Tobago's autonomy forward. The PNM administration continues to lead this process, and we, of course, will see it through to the end. While we recognize the fact that there are limitations to the Tobago House of Assembly Act 1996, today's motion in no way can advance that agenda because all the work has already been done. So what is the minority council leader and his team going down to Trinidad to do? The establishment of the Constitution Commission, which worked from 2012 to now to conduct research on self-government for Tobago, and we have quite a lot of persons who sat on that committee, and who, as I said, would have traversed the length and breadth of Tobago. The PNM would have ensured that we convene the forum of political parties with the PNM, the TOP, the Platform of Truth. The TOP attended some of the meetings. PNM piloted all of the meetings as a PNM administration, and we held meetings at Signal Hill, we held meetings at Roxborough, etc., all in an effort to ensure that our people's voice can be registered and accounted for in the process. We had THA assemblymen who reaffirmed their commitment for the autonomy on bill on September 25th, 2014. And based on the convention resolution, when the PNM met as well between December 2014 and April 2015, Mr. Orville London, the then Chief Secretary, exchanged several letters with former Prime Minister Kamala Persesa-Bissad on that issue. And what I'm doing today, Madam Presiding Officer, is to outline that the People's National Movement Administration has worked tirelessly and ensure that we have come to this point today where we have the document on the legislative agenda. I want to say that Mrs. Persad-Bissesa, she set up a Trinidad team, and they met with a Tobago team again, which comprised several discussions and which was held in March 2015 and subsequently on the 15th of April 2015 at the Hyatt in Regency in Port of Spain. We had the forum of political parties who would have come together again following the general elections in 2015, and at that time that involved Chrislyn Moore, Tobago Forwards, and again Mr. Duke declined to participate. So when did he all of a sudden obtain this newfound desire to represent Tobagonians on the discussions having to do with Tobago's autonomy? In 2016, Madam Presiding Officer, trade unions were invited to participate. And so as I listened to those on the opposite side, Madam Presiding Officer, I think this is an issue of the minority leader and his team trying to be relevant. I think the Minority Council wants to negate the opinions of any committee or consultation of which they want the opinion to be the only one. That is what they are attempting to do. But the truth must be told that the People's National Movement Administration, in successive administrations as well, have all led this fight towards ensuring that we can have greater autonomy for the people of Tobago. Madam Presiding Officer, again, it is because of the efforts of the PNM-led Tobago House of Assembly and the PNM Central Government that the constitutional amendment Tobago Self-Government Bill 2018 was laid before the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago in the third session of the 11th Parliament. The bill is now before a joint select committee of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, and as the JSC deliberates, the bill has been laid for the 4th and 5th sessions of the 11th Parliament, and it is currently on the PNM Legislative agenda. So what is the minority leader and his team going down to Trinidad to do? Madam Presiding Officer, well, let me clear the air for this House and for the listening public that the Tobago House of Assembly has always advocated for greater autonomy for the people of Tobago. We have done so since the inception of the minority party, a fight that predates the PDP and one that will continue to be fought. We welcome all stakeholders' input, and so any suggestions that you might have had that may influence a sustainable democratic governance system was welcomed at that particular time. And as I said, we have recognized the shortcomings of the Act 40 of 1996, and we have been making sufficient representation to ensure that we can have it addressed in the shortest possible time frame. You have heard from our Prime Minister, our Tobago boy, on several occasions on how he plans to treat with the issue within the shortest possible time frame. And he has articulated, however, it will be a matter for the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, because Tobago cannot give itself self-government. Trinidad cannot give Tobago self-government. But between Trinidad and Tobago and the Parliament of the People's Representative, we can answer that question of how we can do it. Madam Presiding Officer, I also want to state very clearly that we will not allow the haste and militancy to compromise the development of a sustainable system. But I agree with them that we have a unique political heritage. We stand on the shoulders of people like APT James, A.N.R. Robinson, Orville London, and many, many others who have overtly and covertly gotten us to where we are today. The systems and the infrastructures that they have laid has placed us in a better position to assume greater autonomy over even our destiny. We will not disrespect the foundation they have provided by rashly grabbing at the reflection in the mirror. The reflection shows us what we could have, but we are way too clever to grab too fast. And so while you are criticizing and jostling for media time, I want to say to this honorable House, we have been strengthening our systems and infrastructure to ensure that when we have greater autonomy, we are able to make it at last. That our society and way of life will continue without any adverse impact. Madam Presiding Officer, I am concerned, as history has shown it, that governance taken rashly and in conflict has not benefited the people in the long run. And we can cite many different examples, whether we look over there in Cuba, in Haiti, in Uganda. And so the history book speaks loudly to that, on the history books on the shelf. And our minority council seems to want to take greater autonomy now without due process by any means necessary. And I know this is not what Tobagonians want. Let us follow the process and make sure that what we achieve is honest, is democratic, and most importantly, what we achieve is sustainable.
Remember, you have 10 more minutes of speaking time.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, I want to use this opportunity to indicate that this motion is seriously flawed, and it reflects an ignorance of Tobago's history as it speaks to a legislative pursuance for autonomy by the people of Tobago since 1980. The minority is denouncing all the work of our forefathers, Madam Presiding Officer, when they speak about full independence, full legislative independence, and cessation, to name a few. And so today, the minority needs to participate in the existing process and to encourage their counterparts in Trinidad, which are the opposition, to support Tobago's desire for autonomy as set out in the Constitutional Amendment Bill. Has the minority leader appeared or made any representation to his UNC counterparts, Madam Presiding Officer? I'm asking the question for clarity and for answer. Did the minority leader attend any of the GSC sittings on this issue in Tobago? Has the minority leader urged anyone, whether it be in the trade union, the opposition, all of his connections in Trinidad, Madam Presiding Officer, to help move the process forward? But he comes to this house with his team grandstanding to the people of Tobago that he is all bent on moving self-determination for the people of Tobago. Madam Presiding Officer, I want to posit that we are in this together. The People's National Movement has started the process. The People's National Movement will see through the process, and the People's National Movement will continue, the administration will continue to advocate for self-determination and greater autonomy on behalf of the people of Tobago. We have already made great strides, and we are getting closer. I want to remind the minority leader and his team that development is a journey. It is not a destination. And so even when we get greater autonomy, we need to have the infrastructure to build on. And that is what we are working on in the PNM-led administration of the Tobago House of Assembly. Madam Presiding Officer, I so move my contribution to this motion. Thank you.
Member for Palliative Lands for me, Speyside.
Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Officer, members of the House, members of the viewing public, good day. I wish to commence with an analogy, and the analogy extends the piecemeal one given by the leader of government business. Most Tobagonians will be familiar with what an extended family looks and feels like. Most Tobagonians will know what it means to share a family home well beyond the age of youth. And most Tobagonians will know what it means to, well, perhaps many Tobagonians will know what it means to move out from upstairs and build up downstairs and move in downstairs of the same house because you want your own space. Madam Presiding Officer, this motion is asking Tobagonians, asking this House, and is sending a clear signal to Trinidad that we are not interested in living downstairs any house with Trinidad. We want our own house. This motion understands that living downstairs is no real autonomy. Yes, you may have the keys to the doors downstairs. You may be able to go and come as you like, but I'm certain you can't get up in the morning and paint the outside of the downstairs in whatever color you want, because mommy and daddy upstairs determines the color of the entire house. And so what we are saying is that the land is available, and we want to move out from downstairs, which is where we have been since 1980 with the start of this THA. We want to move out from downstairs and build our own house alongside the existing house. That is what we are saying. We are also saying that we ought not to be afraid. And what we see happening from the other side is fear-mongering, an attempt to scare Tobagonians into staying downstairs. But most Tobagonians will know it's always the wicked uncle or auntie or the greedy sibling who has never wanted to move out because they think somehow all the land's supposed to be for them. All the family land belongs to them and them alone. So they want you to stay put downstairs, and they want you to enjoy staying downstairs because somehow that is all the autonomy you deserve. We are saying to Tobagonians, and we are signaling to Trinidad that we are unsatisfied, dissatisfied rather, with just simply staying downstairs. We're ready to move out and build our own house. And like most Tobagonians, we understand building your own home doesn't come easy because most of us, we don't even have title deeds for the land that we have lived on for generations successively. And so we know we have to build out a pocket, buy a pallet of brick here, buy a pallet of cement there, build little by little. But we know even if the house incomplete next door, once we build it, even if it's a little caboose, it is ours. And you have full reign and full independent rights for that house. And that is what we are saying to this house and saying to those opposite. You know, Dr. Jeff Davidson, a former chairman of this house, a former presiding officer in this house, he compiled a book called Tobago versus the PNM, where he delineated the arguments of the then PNM against Tobago getting any form of autonomy. And that's why I am astonished that PNMites will get up in this house and behave as if they always supported autonomy. Nothing is further from the truth. And Tobagonians know that for a fact. But I wish to propose that Dr. Jeff Davidson was even wrong in the title of his book. Because it's not Tobago versus the PNM, it is Tobago versus Trinidad. And from where we sit, where we stand, we know that regardless of who is in charge in Trinidad, there is this fear, this resistance from Trinidadians towards Tobagonians getting the kind of autonomy, getting the kind of relative independence that we are speaking about. And it's regardless of who is in charge down there. So this is not a Tobago versus PNM issue. This is a Tobago versus Trinidad issue. And the motion is so correctly worded. In fact, the motion asks that both sides go down to Trinidad and speak to both sides in Trinidad together. Yes, we are aware there was a GSC, and I will come to that shortly. We are aware of where that Tobago bill is, but and members opposite have alluded to it, that for anything to pass, any constitutional measure to pass, we need both sides to vote for it. And the role of the PNM that is in charge of the THA in Tobago is not to dig in their heels and say, well, we're only talking to PNM in Trinidad, or rather, they're only taking instructions from PNM in Trinidad. Their role, the role of the majority, the role of the Executive Council in Tobago is to be Tobago's chief advocate and to advocate and to negotiate with anybody, including political enemies in Trinidad. Time to stop playing games. Stop behaving as though it's the minority and the UNC link. As a matter of fact, Madam Presiding Officer, that is Calcutta Ship 2.0. That's exactly what they're trying to do. Trying to jump up at the same old 2013 arguments. But Tobagonians are wiser and smarter because we have all grown to realize that both the UNC and the PNM are being financed by the same group of people. And then the PNM returns to Tobago, tell us, hate everybody from Trinidad, and then proceeds to give us promises that never materializes. It is a fact, Madam Presiding Officer, that 15 of the last 20 years, we have had PNM in Tobago and PNM in Trinidad, yet nothing. And so this discussion, these debates, these arguments about Tobago's autonomy did not start 15 years ago, not even 40 years ago, because Tobago didn't even want to go with Trinidad in the first place. We didn't want to have anything to do with them in the first place. So this argument has been as old as the Union of Trinidad and Tobago. And so what the minority leader did was to look at several jurisdictions, not even in the Commonwealth, because Tobagonians have a right to decide on whatever government arrangement it wants, even if it does not resemble anything in Trinidad or anything within the Commonwealth. It has the right. And the minority leader is right in bringing up those examples because there are several territories around the world where you have sub-territories with relative independence. There is nothing new about that, nothing novel about that. Clearly, some people are not reading sufficiently. There's nothing novel about that. That exists far and wide. And so what Tobago is asking for is that we proceed post-haste. Yes, I am saying post-haste, to ensure that Tobago gets the kind of autonomy it wants. And I'm surprised that we are still talking internal self-government. We're still at the stage of internal self-government. Madam Presiding Officer, internal self-government was the alternative when PNM Trinidad, led by Dr. Eric Williams and others, were unwilling to support the autonomy that Tobago wanted. That's how we came up with this internal self-government business. We want more than this internal self-government business. Additionally, I wish to quote from the Prime Minister, not something I like to do often, or that I have the opportunity to do often, but the Prime Minister, at the 21st sitting of the House of Representatives, on Friday the 9th of March 2018, the Honorable Keith Rowley, Tobagonian by birth, Trini by boat, he said, and I quote, "Trinidad, by contrast, was still a Spanish colony in 1768. 29 more years would pass before it became British, and 64 years before it was granted an unelected Council of Government, later called the Legislative Council, in 1832. Tobago's position in the 19th century has been described as superior to that of Trinidad, because as one of the older British colonies, it enjoyed representative institutions. Tobago had its own bicameral legislature with its own governor and commander-in-chief. The island was self-governing as opposed to being a crown colony." Close quote. In other words, the Prime Minister correctly cited the history in reminding the entire nation that Tobago was not a crown colony until it was joined with Trinidad. We became a crown colony of Trinidad. And to this very day, we are struggling against that crown colony status with Trinidad. To this very day. The Prime Minister went further in his statement, as placed on the Hansard of that day. He said, a number of issues were identified as fundamental to an equitable relationship between the two islands in the sovereign democratic nation of Trinidad and Tobago. These were one, equality of status between the two islands and a legislative framework reflecting such equality. Not me say so, the Prime Minister saying this. 2, a federal type system of government. Not me say so, the Prime Minister said that. Definition and delineation of the boundaries of each island in accordance with the Constitution. Not me say that, the Tobago Prime Minister said that. The responsibility of the Tobago administration to formulate and implement policy on all, he didn't say some, on all matters affecting the lives of people resident in Tobago. Close quote. And after the Prime Minister said this, we all had the opportunity to look at the bill before the JSC. And when we look at the bill before the JSC, one of the fundamental issues raised by the Prime Minister, which was defining and delineating the boundaries of Tobago, that was replaced with almost nothingness. That was changed without consent from Tobagonians. So when they come in to talk about what Tobagonians want, their own Prime Minister, their own leader of the party, knew what Tobago wants, knew what Tobago sent down, and then proceeded to ensure that what went before the JSC did not reflect what Tobagonians wanted in terms of the definition and delineation of the boundaries of Tobago. After making it clear up front that that was pivotal to what Tobagonians wanted. But me and hear them say a word about that. Me and hear they arguing about that. They're ready to go along with it, to get along with it. And that's why I said this fight is not a Tobago versus PNM fight. This is a Tobago versus Trinidad fight. Full stop. And it's either we're ready to take the fight or we're not. We have to also ensure, Madam Presiding Officer, we have to also ensure that as we are fighting for this thing, that we don't get to the point of losing our zest and the sense of urgency that is required. We cannot lose the sense of urgency that is required at all. In fact, we should now be more militant than James Bigat, than A.P.T. James and Robinson put together. We should be more militant than those three leaders put together, because it has been that long that we have been debating this and how it should be done. So this talk about we shouldn't be militant is stupid talk. That is stupid talk, Madam Presiding Officer. Further, I wish to say to the leader of the PNM that the good lady has more belly than calabash to talk about democracy and about party in order after she done bulldoze her own party. To lecture who? To lecture who? She can't lecture anybody. Pot call him and tell him pan at the bottom black. Foolishness, hypocrisy of the highest. More belly than calabash. And I will further not be lectured on what my members of my electoral district want. Certainly not by somebody who never contested a seat. If you want to lecture people on wrong representation, go run in an election. And don't try to usurp the authority of those who were elected. Run, and we welcome you with bated breath. Welcome you with bated breath. Because Tobagonians are rightfully saying, Madam Presiding Officer, we are fed up of this talk about autonomy. And you know, we really have a major argument that is really semantic. It's about whether you choose to use the word autonomy or you choose to use the word independence. Because what we are asking for from the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago is a legislature that can legislate at will without control from a cabinet in Trinidad for matters that Tobagonians deem important. That's an independent legislature. And then, when we speak to how the COVID issue and how that was handled, we are not in any way saying that better could have been done, because perhaps better couldn't be done considering who in charge. What we are saying is that the COVID issue raised frontally for Tobagonians how much we are without any authority on this island of Tobago. I spent long hours walking up, down, left, right, hills, gully, everywhere, signing people up for grants. Right? Sending the grants to an email that had the word Tobago in it, assuming that the THA that has control over health, social services, and so on, was perhaps the ones to vet these emails and to ensure that people get the grants they need. Only to be told more than a month after that Trinidad now decided to send me back the things and them so we go vet them because we found some fraud. Foolishness. It affects our lives. And yes, that's why we have to talk autonomy in the middle of a pandemic, because it's affecting our lives. When I could sign up 49 people, Blow doesn't have 49 workers let go. 49. Not 19, not 9, not 49, but 49. And not one of them get a grant yet. Not one of them. And you know why? Because their grant application has to be streamed and decided upon by somebody in Trinidad, whether they could get it or not. And that should not be. We have a THA here that should have been doing the vetting. We should have been doing the vetting. And the truth is, the law permits us so to do. The law permits us to be lateral in our thinking. Yet we come here today to pretend to Tobagonians that somehow you are the only ones that love Tobago and you're the only ones fighting for this autonomy. When the history says otherwise, when the history says that you all have been the biggest opponents to autonomy in Tobago, verbally and otherwise. When Robinson carried the bill to Parliament, some of your own PNM members, some who are perhaps exec members now, some who are on your campaign platforms, walked around Tobago, trump up a fake petition, went down to Trinidad and claimed that Tobagonians didn't want autonomy with a bogus petition. That's how far they went. So don't come in this house and call up Robinson's name and call up APT James' name as though you love them. You never loved them. You never agreed with them. You never did. So don't pretend like you do now. It's hypocrisy. It makes you liar. Not even liar, liar. And so, Madam Presiding Officer, we are resolute in saying this house must maturely pick itself up, go down to the Central Parliament where a constitutional amendment must be made. Both sides must talk to both parties. And this is outside that JSC where we had Minister Robinson Regis trying to tell us what international law says, as though she's an international lawyer. Tell us we can't define boundaries in the law. Trying to tell us foolishness. We must go down there and speak forcefully to both sides and say to both sides, man to man, woman to woman, man to woman, that this is what Tobago wants. Tobago wants a legislature with relative independence, and we want it now. Yes, we're busy because we didn't start this yesterday. And no, PNM didn't start this advocacy for greater autonomy. PNM didn't start it. In 1996, Robinson tried to get an upgraded version, and this is what we have today.
Remember, you have 10 more minutes.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. And in fact, I am one of those who fault Robinson for doing the 33-3, for not ensuring that we had what he set out to give us since the beginning. He's at fault for that. But I will not sit here and allow people to stand in this house and pretend like they love Tobago more than anybody else. Like they were and are the only ones who have pushed for this thing for Tobago. No. And we are also acknowledging, yes, this house met, and in good faith, we all agreed to support the process. But where has that process led us since 2018 to now? The last time a bill came, the then opposition leader, now Prime Minister, walked out on the process and said he's not going to be engaged just before an election on any Tobago bill. He walked out on it. What has happened again? The same Prime Minister going to come just before an election to tell us about Tobago bill. Clearly, this is a political issue for people. Clearly it is. And so, we are saying there is no cop out this time. Because we are going to hold both UNC and PNM accountable. This is a Tobago versus Trinidad fight. And I could tell you, I studied with Trinis too. Some PNM, some UNC, and some don't care. And I could tell you every single one of them without exception thinks lowly of Tobago. They think that somehow we are just there, beggars, waiting to get some money from the national coffers, waiting to just feed off at Trinidad. That's how they view us. And that must change. And we must change that. And the way to change that is for us in a united way to go down to Trinidad, stand in the face and say, look, this is what we want. What is afraid all afraid? All afraid to stand up to their own political leader? Perhaps that is why Tobago needs a Tobago-centric party that has no arm in Trinidad. So we ain't afraid nobody. Man, no woman, no child. Afraid none of them down there. Because Tobago must get what Tobago wants. That is what must happen. And so don't come to this house and try to muddy the water, try to throw in all sort of covert racism in the mix. Foolishness. Tobagonians have grown past that. We're wiser now. We have seen that we were fooled. We saw it. If they didn't think so, then it would have still been 12-0. The fact that it is not 12-0, it means that you have lost something. And so we are saying to this house, let's go down together, stand in their faces, notwithstanding what happened at the JC, meet with the opposition, wherever their headquarters is located, meet with those in the executive or the cabinet, wherever they are located, and say to them, PNM Tobago, PDP Tobago, this is what Tobago wants. We want a legislature with relative independence. That's what we want. We need to go and say that to them, to their faces. But let's not come in this house and think that Tobagonians are all ignorant of their history, particularly their political history, because we're not. And those like myself that did not live it had parents that live it. I have a father whose first job came just before Tobago voted against PNM and voted for DSC and Robinson and the crew, and knew what it was for the Ministry of Tobago to be moved out of Tobago and couldn't get pay for months on end just because Eric Williams was trying to spite Tobagonians. PNM did that. So don't come with conflated history. We know the real history. We know what happened. And many of us have parents who lived that history. And therefore, even in this COVID, it presents us with the reality that we have no powers, that we have to sit down, we have to wait. We can't get grants to people until Trinidad says so. We can't give people rent money unless Trinidad says so. We can't open the quarry unless Trinidad says so. Those are symbolic, those are indicative of the fact that Tobago has no real powers. None. We ain't get none. And if we had real powers, then we didn't need to ask Cabinet for Caribbean Airlines to start back to fly. We could have determined on our own when they fly and when they ain't fly. We could have determined when we're opening up and when we ain't. But we have no powers, so we're talking about. And Tobago stands to be much more affected by this in terms of our economics than Trinidad. We stand to fear the worst because our economy is based on tourism. And therefore, if nothing else, the economic realities of Tobago should behoove us all to fight for this thing with a kind of militancy like never seen before. Like never seen before. Because a lot of the economic plans we will need are contingent on us having those rights, those legal rights. You think we, after COVID, we still have to beg some minister in Trinidad for whether we could borrow money or not? When we need money? Why? Why? And now is an opportune time. We must say to the central government together that we are not allowing the general election to come until you meet and fix this. That is what we must say to the central government. And we must say to them forcefully. But, Madam Presiding Officer, I recognize my colleagues opposite are afraid. They are contented with being hypocritical about the history of Tobago. They are contented with pretending to love Tobago and pretending this out and hoping that when it fails, they could stick it on the UNC and then indirectly stick it on the PDP. But we are saying we are ready, we are prepared, let's go down to Trinidad together, minority and majority, and as one assembly say to the central government, this is what we want. Don't change the definition, don't take it out of the law, put it back in, leave it as it is. Give us our rights, and then we come home and we argue the politics. We debate each other one-on-one, man-to-man, and work out the intricacies of what governance will look like on the island. And then and only then, we could behave like big men and women. Until then, we're still downstairs the house called Trinidad. Not even Trinidad and Tobago. We're still downstairs the house called Trinidad and hoping that some crumbs from upstairs will fall downstairs and hoping that mommy and daddy upstairs ain't get vexed when we're too loud downstairs and that we do everything in agreement with mommy and daddy upstairs. Now is the time for us to move out. We're under Trinidad too long. Time to move out. Let's build our house next door, and only then we could talk side by side. Until then, it's one on top and one below. And that is unfortunate. We do not want to be below anybody. We want to be side by side. Full stop. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer.
Assistant Secretary for Tourism, Culture and Transportation.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. And I am particularly grateful for this opportunity to speak on this motion. But before I get into matters which concern me most, permit me to draw from the definition gleaned on the internet by one of the most profound scholars I've had to interact with, Professor Google, who said, a lie is the act of speaking falsely or uttering untruths knowingly so as to intentionally deceive or convey false impressions. I never thought that I would have had an opportunity to come to this house and to say that a motion put forward by the minority is vexatious. But I would wish to attempt to exhaust my vocabulary on that word and say not only is this motion vexatious and preposterous, but it is aggravating, annoying, burdensome, disagreeable, disappointing, disturbing, irksome, irritating, nagging, provoking, tormenting, troublesome, trying, ugly, unpleasant, and altogether upsetting. This motion is a fallacy. Madam Presiding Officer, when I examined the motion when it was first presented me in a package, I wondered, where are we really going with this thing? And I gave the benefit of the doubt that perhaps my newness in this political arena doesn't allow for me to be able to glean the kinds of important information that ought to have been articulated by a motion of this nature. And I thought that perhaps when I come to the House, I would have heard with articulate accuracy what the spirit of the motion and the intent of this motion would have been. Instead, all I heard were a set of emotive languages spoken by members opposite, the mover of the motion refusing to speak with certainty on what ought to be proposed or actually what was proposed, the minority councillor opposite coming and talking a set of things that unrelated to the spirit of the motion and the ideals of the people of Tobago, and then finally, a minority elected member who was so confused that he started off lending support to our disagreement with this motion and then bringing it all around together by stating that Tobago don't want to live downstairs Trinidad. I can say with certainty that I have affirmed from my earliest utterances in the spirit of our national song, side by side we stand. We're not downstairs, no house named Trini. But Madam Presiding Officer, you see, you have to put this lie in a particular context. And I want to put it in the context of a proposal by the minority leader on a political platform that spoke to an expanded Store Bay. Oh gosh. Store Bay bordered by properties on the left and properties on the right. Where you're going to expand it? Vertically, you're going to tear Store Bay up. This is the same minority leader, Madam Presiding Officer, who put forward a motion today that represents a lie, who said he would build an airport in Roxborough. 3 years after, the only thing he's spoken about Roxborough is the fact that he's looking good up there while doing nothing, courtesy the People's National Movement and PNM-led administration here in Tobago. Madam Presiding Officer, when I consider this motion and what it does not speak to, I am troubled beyond measure. I'm troubled because, and let me pull it up here. I'm troubled because, Madam Presiding Officer, the facts are before us that the consultative process saw to 4 years of engagement, 20 venues as articulated by my colleague, Councillor Devines, 100 hours of discussions and deliberations, 120 written submissions, and an engagement of over 6,000 persons, and the minority leader refused to be a part of that, but has come today to tell us that the people of Tobago want independence from Trinidad. Independent from what and independent for who? Madam Presiding Officer, Professor Google told me again that a failed state is one that has lost control of its territory or of its monopoly to legitimately lose its resources. A failed state is an erosion of legitimate authority, as is articulated in the Tobago Act that exists now. A failed state represents one that has the inability to provide public services and other essential services, and the inability to interact with other states as a full member of the international community. What the Minority Council is proposing is not independence from Trinidad, but the establishment of a failed state that they could call Tobago, and we do not support that at all. In fact, if I am to go further, I would recognize from their submissions today that this motion already should have been called the Tobago's Republic of the United National Congress. That is what they're trying to get here. You see, I listened to, in particular, the minority leader and the minority councillor, and both have admitted, and the records will show, the Hansard will tell, and person's memory will bear accurate testament to same, that they have confessed today that the UNC is not in support of Tobago's autonomy, and therefore they have positioned themselves to sell what remains of our dignity by allowing for a political mercenary, the minority leader, to come and talk a talk contrary to the wills of the people of the island of Tobago. I would not have imagined that a statement of fact like that would be made. And it was made, in fact, when they said that neither the UNC or the PNM, and this is not a matter of red against black. In fact, this is not a matter of red against black. This is a matter of yellow. Yellow. That's what this is a matter of. And they go on and on and on, Madam Presiding Officer. And the thing is, the minority council in particular spoke about an election year and an election football and very emotive language that let me tell you, disappointing. Disappointing at best. Foolish at worst. That is what this is today. I would have thought that a motion like this may have allowed for some kind of intellectual exchange to happen in the House despite the political divide. Instead, no mention of what this independent legislature would look like was made by the minority. So we don't know if, in fact, what they want to do is a version 2.0 of what has already been proposed by the People's National Movement and by the what they call them, something of parties, the forum of political parties. I would have thought that the member would have spoken to the legislative framework for equality and equity. I would have thought that the definition of the boundaries of each island would have been established. I would have thought that the jurisdiction and control over economic resources may have been intimated. I would have thought that they would have mentioned things concerning the lawmaking authority or capacity to borrow, fiscal measures, removal of cabinet's dominance. I would have thought of a framework for wider societal participation participation in decision-making and financial agreements, and I would have thought that all the tenets that would justify an autonomous body would have represented the contents of their contribution today, but instead all we heard was PNM UNC, PNM PDP, PNM Trinidad, PNM Tobago, Tobago against Trinidad, upstairs and downstairs, the color of your house, the color of your skin, the color of your thinking, and nothing that adds value to the conversation related to the advancement of the people of Tobago and their spirit of industry and determination. Nothing of that nature was added. But I can tell you this. It was Nicholas Thatcher who said, the essence of independence has been to think and act according to standards from within and not without, nor to follow the path of another or the crowd, but to pursue one's own conviction with belief and spirit. Tell me then, where in your motion, members of the minority, is there the essence of independence that speaks to conviction to follow one's own path with spirit? Tell me then, from your submission, what would an independent legislature look like, think like, sound like? What will it comprise? Tell me then, what will your political mercenaristic behaviors that have led you to try to sell Tobago to the UNC look like? Tell us then, Mr. Mover of the motion, with whom you've consulted. We can state our number, over 6,000 persons. Tell us with whom you've consulted. I am amazed that for the first time in the contribution by the minority councillor, she has not said that, as I often do, I have put the motion out on Facebook to hear what the people of Tobago have to say. Where was your widespread participating consultative process to allow for the kind of representation that we give that you now want? Tell me what your Facebook polls have said, because I know with certainty you've done none. Because every time you come here, you use this legislative house, this intellectual assembly as a vehicle for making idle boasts and purporting foolishness. But I didn't hear that today, because no homework was done. Instead, what they wanted was an opportunity to say that this PNM-led administration does not engage in lateral thinking. I think that that's the only profound thing that was said, and it is profoundly incorrect. So somebody come back from a university somewhere, and because of Zoom and Teams and online forum and satellite locations, they were able to have conversations with their colleagues from all over the globe, and they hear the phrase lateral thinking, and they decided to construct emotion on the basis of that revelation. I would have said go back to school, but it seems as if it were your schools that made you fools. So I would purport instead that you come a little closer, keeping 6 feet away, so that I would breathe the wisdom of my counsel over your lives. Madam Presiding Officer, I would have thought that as we would have sent down this motion that is now before the Joint Select Committee for an autonomous Tobago House of Assembly for greater autonomy, self-determination, self-governance, that conversations may have been had about the establishment of a Tobago Service Commission by the members opposite. Because the truth is this, If you're talking about an independent Tobago, then you have to have a conversation about all the arms of state and all the sectors of society that will sustain your independence. Else, what you would have done was establish an equation to rebrand Tobago as the second Haiti. If you would not have done that, then what you would have done was try to position Tobago to get the kinds of sanctions that now fall to Venezuela. What you would have done was to erode the confidence that the international community has in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and therefore establish a kind of society that is unstable and that can't be governed. In fact, it might be true to say that this motion is an attempt to make the island of Tobago ungovernable. But look at this. Look at this. We agreed that we would move forward with one voice. Now we have a difference in opinion. We understand that the process of amending the Constitution and affecting positive changes to law is not automatic, is not overnight, and for the most part, it ain't easy. But instead, we have a minority that comes to the House and that only sits through an entire proceeding when it is a private member's motion. We have a minority that is calling for a Prime Minister of the Tobago's Republic of the UNC. We have a minority that hypocritically suggested that under the Kelvin Charles-led administration, Tobago was heading to a place of disrepair, and that instead Assemblyman Augustine should become Chief Secretary, but then changes the narrative and changes the story, adding to the hypocrisy that defines who they are, and now calling the youngest elected Chief Secretary appointed to the Tobago House of Assembly a boy king. What would your Augustine have been? What would your Augustine have been? If my Chief Secretary is a boy king, what would your Augustine have been? Answer me. And when you come back with your closing salvo, put it on the Hansard. The hypocrisy that allows us to see that not only do you have a disgust and a disrespect perpetuated towards women, but you also lack to support the creativity and the industriousness of children and young adults and youth altogether. You, therefore, ought to live in an island by yourself, and you could call it Tobago number 2. Or as it were, the Tobago's Republic of the UNC. Madam Presiding Officer, there is something fundamental that I want to bring to everybody's attention. And I want to also call it to the attention of the viewing and listening public, not just here on the island of Tobago, but the world over, that we must be careful. We must be careful of whom we or to whom we lend our support. We must be careful to what things we lend our attention. We must be mindful of what things to which we commit our intelligences. We must be cautious in the management of ourselves and of our affairs. You see, because I can say with certainty that just as Tobago cannot trust a PDP-led Tobago House of Assembly, we cannot trust the minority leader who would call everything progressive, everything that speaks to our development and our advancement, stupid or silly or unbecoming and unbright. How can we trust such a person with power if we can't even trust them with one of the basic human values, respect? Let me allow that to soak in. How can we trust a people that is more interested in office than they are in service? How can we trust a people when they came with a motion that does not represent the values or the intents of the people of Tobago and pretend as though they are ambassadors and custodians of our future liberties? How can we trust a people that walks out of the house on every sitting, abandoning their responsibility to the persons who gave them their confidence? How can we trust a people who from time after time will call upstanding and reputable members of our society ugly and dunce, dotish and nobody? How can we trust a people who are guided neither by moral clarity nor spiritual values? How can we trust a people who would bring a motion like this to the House, asking us to consider what never before formed part of our conversation? So I put to you a question that I believe is not unreal. The question is this: what good can amount from minority and majority going to Trinidad together? What good can amount from that? A protest outside of Parliament does not impact upon constitutional amendments, certainly not. Calling every media house to call somebody ugly on national TV certainly cannot adjust the law. And I'm saying to us here in Tobago and those listening the world over that we have to be careful and protect our patrimony. We must be careful. Look at this. Let me find it here. Sometimes the technology doesn't follow direct instructions and you just have to repeat yourself. iPad, recalibrate yourself quickly. Nice, you see? Instructions. We have identified.
You have 10 more minutes of speaking time.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. I must confess, if I were to use the entire 10 minutes, you would have to reprimand me for unparliamentary language. And so I would be brief so as to not bring this House into disrepute or odium. And so, in winding up, we have acknowledged what Bob Marley said, that every man got the right to decide his own destiny. But when we look at our Constitution, not but, and when we look at our Constitution, there it is written in the preamble that that right is conferred on us as a sovereign rule of law. I wonder, therefore, has the minority considered the Constitution that guides us today? Have they had an opportunity to look at articles of law that determines the conduct of the society in which we live? Have they looked at the examples of neighboring territories and examined the catastrophe that befell them as they tried to divorce themselves from an established system that works? Have they considered that an independent Tobago must have a currency to sustain its industry? Have they considered that? What then would our currency be? What would it be? The T? Because it can't be the TTD. Have they considered that this Tobago is an island that prides its industry on our tourism product? And an independent Tobago would then mean that we have to look at ways of coming up with things outside of our tourism product that will sustain our economies and our industry. Well, have they considered that will speak to the establishment of factories, that will consider the establishment of industries, and that their emissions and their waste and the lack of management of those things would impact directly on our environment and our green spaces and our air qualities? And have they considered that there must be serious contemplation given to what our U.S. reserves and or U.S. bank would look like, and the possibilities of engaging in international trades and negotiations and regional commerce? Have they considered that an independent Tobago is more than an idea? Have they considered that any strategic approach to advancement must be well thought out, that foundational works must be done, that there must be strides made incrementally but progressively? Or have they only considered that a motion like this on the heels of a general election would emotionalize the listening audience, sensationalize the public, and cause them to believe that because you've spoken with a decibel elevated beyond the norm, that you're somehow right? I could tell you that you can be a loud wrong. You can be a noisome error. And I'm saying to us today, what the minority needs above all else is to go back to the drawing board or perhaps return to the table of negotiation and arm themselves with strategic information that will advance the business of the people of Tobago and the quality of the lives of the people of Tobago. Tobagonians aren't calling for what you're offering. We certainly have not been privy to your lack of online polls this time around. And we certainly do not want, as it were, the right to just paint over the downstairs independent of the color of upstairs. We certainly don't want an opportunity to leave home only on the basis of fighting an ungrateful or selfish ante to the right of land or property. And we certainly do not want it to go down in our nation's history that we are an unelectoral people, as will be defined or definitive of the motion laid in this House today. I thank you.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. This will be a brief wrapping up. Again, I begin with the summation of our motion. Whereas the Tobago House of Assembly, THA, in its current legal form, has limited powers as outlined in the Tobago House of Assembly Act 40 of 1996, as recently manifested in 1, the THA being required to write to the Prime Minister seeking permission to urgently open the Studley Park quarry, as indicated by the Prime Minister on Saturday the 16th of May 2020, and 2, the THA being unwilling and unable to employ lateral thinking and actions related to COVID-19 health and finance policies for Tobago, separate and apart from Trinidad. And whereas Tobago was once an independent state with a unique political heritage, and whereas the people of Tobago since 1980 have legislatively pursued without success the level of self-governance autonomy that it desires within the unitary state of Trinidad and Tobago, be it resolved that within 3 months of the passing of this motion, a THA team comprising both members of the Executive Council and the Minority Council engage the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in pursuance of the THA obtaining full legislative independence on the areas of responsibility under the 5th schedule of the THA, Act 40 of 1996. Be it further resolved that the said engagement also pursue the THA having control without the intervention of the government of Republic of Trinidad and Tobago of the services in Tobago outlined under the 7th schedule of the THA Act 40 of 1996. Madam Presiding Officer, this is Tobago, and in this country, we are used to telling stories and listening stories. It's part of our culture, and it's unique because in other parts of the world, people do not tell as much stories. I recall hearing a story about a spider that was way on top of a ceiling. It enjoyed being there. One day, this spider spun its web. It came down to the ground. It found it quite interesting on the floor, walked around, spent a long time there, came back, saw the web, and asked himself, what was this? What is this for again? He then cut the web, and he remained back on the ground. Sometimes we forget from whence we came. Sometimes we could lose our directions. One person are possessed by hate, racism, and bad politics, you could lose your way because a mandate becomes one. Just shoot on sight. Just cuss them on sight. Just get vexed with them on sight. Forget what they say. Just rubbish it on sight. We have been victims on that side. Victims of racist remarks, and they are couching them, the Republic of Tobago in a UNC. Those are racist remarks. Racist remarks. I, as a minority leader, had to sit here today and listen to the former speaker belittle Tobago, referring to Tobago as becoming like Haiti should we pursue legislative independence. We will become like Haiti. We will become like Venezuela, a place that is inundated with sanctions and crippled by them. I had to put up with a young man with towering strength, but the mind, and I wouldn't say what because it's unparliamentary, I had to put up with a man like that, right? Who ridiculed Tobago, laugh at Tobago because Tobago desires legislative independence, the right to make our own laws. But in as much as he's been going to Dr. Google, and as much as he has been listening to Dr. Google, Madam Presiding Officer, I could say to you, he has not been listening to Dr. Rowley. And I understand the nauseating feeling one could get from listening to their leader. I understand that. Especially if he has a prefix doctor in front of their name. But he's fond of listening to Dr. Google. Let me tell you what a document that the good Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, tuned out, what he says. It speaks of Tobagonians having the right to pursue its own economic development. It's there. We're talking about laws and its own legislative rights, making its own laws. It speaks of that. The document speaks of an island of Tobago and an island of Trinidad. And one know good English is quite simple because we were taught it from time we were a baby. What come mean, what go mean. And if you use a word that stands to confuffle, confuse the minds of people, you generally explain the word somewhere. So when the article speaks of an island of Tobago, what does that mean? How do you define an island of Tobago? When you speak of the island of Trinidad, what does that mean? For example, my friends say that they're big on words but small on reasoning. Currently, it is positioned in the THA Act that Tobago, the island of Tobago, comprised of only 6 miles, nautical miles, from the shore of the sea. 6 nautical miles. All right? What does Trinidad comprise of? Everything else. Because they use Trinidad hypocritically to mean Trinidad and Tobago. So when they say Tobago, Tobago is defined specifically. It's boxed in. But Trinidad means everything else Trinidad and Tobago. I say to you, there can be no Tobago and Trinidad and Tobago. All right? What makes United States of America is all the states are united by federal law. I'm wondering if these people understand politics, if they understand governance, or it's just showmanship, wear a tight suit, come up here, use the whole vocabulary wrong, and you walk back down and sit down, put your mask on your face, hiding yourself. There can be no United States without all of the independent states uniting. There can be no Trinidad and Tobago without Tobago being defined. And so the amendment to the Constitution sought to define Tobago. And what we are here speaking about is in furtherance of that. We are saying if you have to define Tobago, we need legislative independence. That is one of the hallmarks of the United Nations. I don't understand what is wrong with him. Full of volume but no content. My Lord, what is going on? Disrespecting Tobago. Saying if we pursue that, we become like Haiti. If we pursue legislative autonomy, legislative independence, we become saddled with sanctions like Venezuela, crippled with sanctions. I ask myself, from whence he came, where is he going to? But I understand his position. He has always been an underling. He has never slept at the top. Give him a deputy and he's good. Give him an assistant work and he's good. And the loudness of his voice, the volume of his voice, is a demonstration to his trainers that I'm a good defender. That's what he's doing here. He's showing his trainers, I'm a good bulldog. Hoof, hoof, hoof. But sometimes I even tell my dog, shut your mouth. Shut up. Too much noise. Noise is irrelevant. What you're barking at? Nothing. A man is barking at, we are saying, let's go down to Tobago. We are going down to Tobago. That's right. Protect me from here, Madam Presiding Officer.
Members, be careful.
The truth hurts, hit like a knife. We are talking here about going down to Trinidad, hand in hand, just like their forefather did. They are all descendants of Dr. Eric Williams. And when he wanted independence, when he was tired of being premier, and he wanted to put on a big man suit and become prime minister, he said, look, he called the next guy from the next opposition team. He said, let's go to England and let's ask for this. If anybody wants something, it's important for us to be in unison. Wow. Wow. It's amazing you could go to the school, university, sit in the Tobago House of Assembly for 3 years and not learn anything. Hence, the only promotion you could get is a deputy work, assistant work, carry the bag. Back at them when they come in the yard. Don't wash no face, just back. But even I train my dogs who to back to. I say, don't back at that one. You crazy? Don't back at that one. Sit, sit. Thank God they are sitting now while I hold the mic. Madam Presiding Officer, I had to put up with another one of my colleagues in this house who came up here swinging left, right, and center. And it's a demonstration of the emptiness that is on the next side. because he leads the business. And if you are leading the business, but when you came up, you said nothing, it says that the side that is now governing is bereft of any direction. And they expect to be going on to salute that, to be happy about that. Madam Presiding Officer, my colleague tried to speak about policies and laws. But any good policy is backed up by law, or is hinged to law. Any good policy is hinged on law. That's why you use law. If there is no law, you can't put policy. So we're going to examine some of the policies they said they create just now. The man joked and mocked at Tobago being an independent state. He said we want lawmaking ability. Let me come to someone who was missing in action. Missing in action. A song, it reminds me of a song that says, Johnny come lately, new kid in town. Everybody loves them. Hope she does not let them down. I will change that song to Jenny come lately. Jenny meaning the political leader. I was amazed that the political leader, well, I should say, the Secretary for Health and Wellness, came up here and took up 40 minutes of good oxygen, speaking and breathing and saying nothing. What I asked for in my first statement was provide us with the policies, provide us with the bills that become law. Two things: provide us with the policies that created over the last 40 years, provide us with the bills that become law. Nothing. Reading a speech as if it's first time she's inside here. But I remember she has been out of it for a while, holidaying. Reading a speech, holidaying. So the person is new. Madam Presiding Officer, what upset me most is when the Secretary for Health and Wellness spoke of policies, the kind of a minuscule, backward, and I don't have the peanut-sized brain of my friend to use more words, but I will just say that the kind of folly that she called out as policies, I'm worried about leadership. Should leadership fall to the PNM? I worry about that. Listen to some of the policies here. Listen to some of the policies. It's become a hodgepodge way of doing things. Listen to the policies. Community centers, that's a policy. To build community centers is a policy. Well, I don't know which new community center they build. They repair community centers. Because when I grew up, all over Tobago had community centers. All over had. I don't know what was the new community centers as a policy. All around Tobago had community centers. All around Tobago and Trinidad. That's a normal thing. In the world, in fact, community centers are a normal thing. I don't know, since you create a policy to build community centers, what policy you create? Hiding the truth with fancy words. That's one of the policies. And I want to be able to listen and judge them. Not by how they slick their hair and how verbose they are, but by the content of their speech. That's one policy. The next policy is to put lights on playing field. So that's a policy. Big policy. The Assembly that is spending $3 billion has to put a policy to put lights on playing field. What is the policy? Because right under your nose, and I'm speaking, Madam President, right under the nose of this Assembly, right up in the east, there's a beautiful place called Louis Door Land Settlement. One of the best playing fields for cricket. And there's no lights there. No lights there. I am from the east, and the political leader of the PNM is from the east. The Secretary for Health and Wellness is from the east. And I dare to say, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed. that they have formed a policy, but right under the nose, the policy has not been implemented. It's a dance at home before a dance abroad. And charity begins at home. Charity begins at home. But they don't care about that. What they care about is loudness, hate, racism. That's what they deal with across here. Second policy, first policy was build community center, as if we never had none. Second one, lights on field. And the third one, extend the hours of healthcare. Extend.
Member?
Yeah.
I will have to call on the leader of Assembly Business to move a motion to extend the sitting.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer, for that moment of respite. I beg to move that this House continue to sit until the business on the order paper is concluded.
Members, the question is that this House continue to sit until the order paper is completed. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any against? The ayes have it. The sitting is continued.
I must extend thanks to the leader of Assembly Business. I think it's one of the most noblest deed he has done. Don't ever stop a man in full flight. Madam Presiding Officer, the political leader of the PNM in Tobago, the Secretary for Health and Wellness, spent 40 minutes taking up oxygen here, saying to us one of the policies they created was to extend the hours of health care. Well, I want them to tell the people of Belgarden that, in the Belgarden Center. Tell the people of Speyside that the hours of health care has been extended. Tell the people that. They don't. Because they have been misrepresenting the facts with their glib speech and loud talking. I agree, Madam Presiding Officer, that they are tired and they want to go home. We are going to send them home. But before I send them home early, I will just point out to them that the world is moving away from autocratic leaders. I didn't say autocratic governments, autocratic leaders. The world is only willing to support leaders that are democratic and leaders that encourage talent. All right? I heard some howling.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. I'm not sure if he's injured. I heard him howling. In the United States of America, big country, Nebraska, a state, has its own parliament, independent of the White House, independent of Capitol Hill, independent of those things. There is, thank God for the mask. Has its own parliament. And right there, when a bill becomes passed, it is the governor, the man who is elected governor, that gives the final sign-off. It stays there. It doesn't go to Capitol Hill. It stays right there in Nebraska, right there in the state. All states in the United States are like that. When the bills become law, it stays right there. The governor signs it off. Not only in the United States, in Germany, Hamburg. The man who heads Hamburg, he's the governor. He's not the governor, he's the mayor. He's elected. But when the bill goes through that unicameral system, and they are satisfied with it, He then signs off of it. Power, law. It does not go to the Chancellor of Germany, nor the President of Germany. It doesn't go there. It stays right there. Because they understand the authority lies in the people of the state. The authority for Tobago matters must lie in the hands and on the backs of Tobagonians, not in Trinidadians. We can't make a law for Trinidad. It's wrong. Hong Kong, the world's newest attachment, became attached a few years ago to China. The leader of government business there is a chief executive. He doesn't want to be called no governor, no mayor, chief executive. And one may ridicule him as a chief executive. That's a small name. But the powers he has is like that of a governor. He has a lot of power. He has veto powers. Or if I can see the she or something like that. Veto powers. And when the laws are made in Hong Kong, it doesn't go to China. It stays right there, and the chief executive signs off on it, proclaims it becomes law. All we are asking for today is that the things that concern Tobago, the things that Trinidad agree and have listed in the 5th schedule, health, social services, the ports, all of these things, agriculture, fisheries, all of these things that have listed under the 5th schedule, we are saying, allow us to make laws for governance and good order of Tobago on these things and to sign them off here. That it shouldn't even go to Trinidad. It should stay right there. That's what we are asking for. We have a right to ask for that. And not because they have not seen it, it can't be done. It is being done around the world. We are free people. We can do as we please. Some people live in a shoebox and they think it's asking too much. All they want to do is to put on a tight suit, walk up and down the place and look like they're hip. That is it for them. As they reach where they're going there. On top, we on the minority side have a different value system. We believe Tobago first. We believe the voice of Tobago should be heard. We believe we are unique. As a matter of fact, we believe that Tobago patois is the first language, as my assemblyman Augustine always say. That's our first language. And English is our second language. So I always love my first language. And I get my children always say, where's that? They always say, what do you say, Daddy? I'm going to tell them again. Because our language is unique to us. And we must cherish it. The way we tell stories and speak in parables is unique to us. We must cherish it. Our value system is unique to Tobago. Tobago is a place where family is important. Very important. Tobago is a place where land is important. Tobago is a place where we believe in education. Where we support each other. Yes, we are clannish in Tobago. Very clannish. Because if one Tobago scores big outside, all of Tobago is happy. It doesn't matter who. We support our own. But the time has come for us to go further. And we are not asking for a slice of the cake, Madam Presiding Officer. We are not even asking for the whole cake. Madam Presiding Officer, we are asking for the factory. Give us the factory. We don't want no slice, no cake, we want the factory. But I have a message as I close up to my good colleagues on the next side. Because I plan not to be long. Don't underestimate the power of 40. From 1980 to 2020 is 40 years. I started with that. I'll give you a few tidbits here. The word 40 is perhaps the only number whose letters appear in alphabetical order. Check it out. They said minus 40. Minus 40. All right? Minus 40 degrees is the same whether Fahrenheit or Celsius. It's a unique thing. 40. I'm going somewhere with 40. Watch 40. It is said the bubonic plague that took place in Europe in the Middle Ages, when ships were coming in to shore, they had to wait outside 40 days. And the Italian word for 40 is quaranta. Quaranta. From which we have the word quarantine. Watch 40. Monopoly has 40 spaces you can go. Only 40 spaces on Monopoly. Pregnancy.
Remember, you have 5 more minutes.
I'll take all of it, Madam President. All of it I'll take. I need it. Pregnancy. Term limited to 40. 40 weeks. It is said it took 40 attempts by chemists to make double D 40. The standard work week, 40 hours. Jesus Christ fasted 40 days. The great flood, 40 days and 40 nights. I hear I'm howling, man. I'm hearing a howling on my left. Please protect me for injury time. And the children of Israel wandered in the wilderness, darkness, among scorpions, among snakes, among people who will tell you they love you and stab you in your back and throw you out. They existed among those people for 40 days and 40 nights. People who went against their own leader and think it was a dignified thing to do. I thank God. Thank God that they didn't leave the children of Israel, because he recognized among them they were righteous people, they were good people. Today we stand on the threshold of 40 years since Tobago has had this House of Assembly restored. Tobagonians have died. Ian Robinson have died. Dr. Murray had died. We are not willing to die and allow this to go unchecked. Today we are saying we demand legislative independence. It is in the parliament, on the books. It's time to bring it forward. If you don't listen to me today, I guarantee you, when your 40 years becomes up, you'll be in trouble. You will be in trouble. Madam Presiding Officer, I thank you as I submit this motion for consideration and passage. Put away the racism, the politics, and let's go down the road together, holding hands, and say we are doing this one for Tobago. Legislative independence, so we can make laws to govern what takes place here in Tobago. I thank you, Madam Presiding Officer.
Members, the question put is, whereas the Tobago House of Assembly, THA, in its current legal form, has limited powers as outlined in the Tobago House of Assembly Act 40 of 1996, as recently manifested in the THA being required to write to the Prime Minister seeking permission to urgently reopen the Studley Park quarry, as indicated by the Prime Minister on Saturday, 16 May 2020. The THA, being unwilling and unable to employ lateral thinking and actions relating to COVID-19 health and finance policies for Tobago, separate and apart from the Cabinet in Trinidad. And whereas Tobago was once an independent state with a unique political heritage, And whereas the people of Tobago since 1980 have legislatively pursued without success the level of self-governance, autonomy that it desires within the unitary state of Trinidad and Tobago. Be it resolved that within 3 months of the passing of this motion, a THA team comprising both members of the Executive Council and the Minority Council engage the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in pursuance of the THA obtaining full legislative independence on the areas of responsibility under the 5th Schedule of the THA Act 40 of 1996. Be it further resolved that the said engagement also pursue the THA having control without the intervention of the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago of the services administered in Tobago outlined in the 7th Schedule of the THA Act 40 of 1996. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? No. The noes have it. The motion is not carried. Leader of Assembly Business.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. I beg to move that this House now stand adjourned to a date to be fixed.
Members, the question is that this House stands adjourned to a date to be fixed. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. The motion is carried. This House now stands adjourned to a date to be fixed.